Today, it's about 2023 and beyond for Countly. So I actually have a couple of items to talk about because we not only updated our products, but we actually introduced a new edition into Countly. And as I mentioned, I will get into what we will be doing or what we are already working on this year. Starting off with Countly Flex, as some of you might know, we actually introduced a new edition of Countly late last year. Countly Flex essentially is a private SaaS to create Countly servers of your own in the region you want with the features you need. Right? So it's not a new product per se, but next to Countly Lite and Enterprise editions, we introduced a somewhat SaaS version into the mix to make it easier for everyone to get started with Countly. In terms of what Flex is, basically like it lets you create your own dedicated Countly server. It's free to start with. Its pricing is based on MAU. So you grow as your user base grows. You have 15 regions to choose from in order to start your server in one of those regions. We made some of the core features available across every single tier of Countly Flex, things such as drill, user profiles, cohorts, funnels. Some of the so far enterprise functionality is available even in the free tier of Countly Flex. Furthermore, if you want to add more functionality to your Countly servers, basically we have an add-on system within Flex, so you can choose, mix and match different features and create your very own server. Since it's your server, so Flex is essentially an interface to help you create your own Countly server, choose the region, choose the settings, the features, etc. So one of those are, of course, like the domain of your server. So you can truly make your Flex server your own, right? Your own domain, your own SSL certificate to your server. You can configure the data retention for granular data. So essentially, we made everything that we have learned so far from Countly Lite and Countly Enterprise over the course of 10 years of operating Countly, and we made them as flexible as possible within Countly Flex. So Flex is already available for sign up, so you can go to countly.com/flex. Very important, it is for us very important. So we are also sharing our story of building Flex. So we are calling it the product-led story. But if you're interested, we have a blog series called the product-led story. You can access it from the given URL. Basically, we talk about the details, the behind the scenes kind of decisions, etc., building necessarily a SaaS product from scratch. So highly recommended. Before getting into server, I want to talk about a very important part of Countly, right? So often overlooked, even by us maybe sometimes, but we have a very strong SDK foundation, right? Like for any analytics platform, the SDKs offered are the starting point of everything, right? So if you don't have an SDK for a given platform, you cannot use that tool, right? So I think this table very neatly conveys the message or like the importance we put into our SDKs. So we have 10 plus, we actually introduced a Google Tag Manager SDK very recently. And as you see here, our main functionality, our main features are supported by majority of our SDKs. And if not, it's not technically possible to support some of the features in those SDKs. Essentially, of course, Countly server, the dashboard, they are user-facing functionality, but under the hood, there is serious engineering going on to maintain our SDKs, to keep them working in a performant way without affecting the user experience. And furthermore, we constantly keep adding new features and optimizing the existing functionality in all of our SDKs. Next up, Countly server updates last year. Before the webinar, I actually looked through our Jira. We essentially have hundreds of tasks and a lot of bugs that we worked on. So this is not like a comprehensive list of everything per se. I tried to pick and choose essentially some of the updates to the Countly server. But yeah, like this has been a work in progress for the past 10 years. So everything we have built so far, we will just continue adding on top of a strong foundation, just like our SDK base, our server strong, and it will only get stronger as we progress. So this will be the format that I share the new functionality. On the bottom left part of the screen, you will see which edition the set functionality or feature is available in. Starting from Countly guides. So maybe you already noticed, but in some sections of Countly, basically there is this new icon, and actually on the left in the sidebar of the dashboard, basically it takes you to a dedicated section where we give you relevant content for the given functionality, such as this one for user profiles. So it's spread into two sections. One, at the top, you have interactive walkthroughs, and at the bottom, we actually give you relevant documentation from our Help Center. We are just starting out, so it's limited in terms of where these specific types of content are available. But the idea is Countly has an open source core. We have a community of users. We have variety of users, like individual developers, small companies, very large enterprises. But essentially the common, I guess, hardship per se is understanding all of the kind of vast functionality Countly offers, getting started with some of the more advanced features. So we are intending to make all of that easier, basically, by providing inline help in a more interactive fashion. If you didn't see this yet, highly recommend it to go through, especially the walkthroughs. And at the bottom of each of these guide sections, we have a feedback mechanism. If you have any feedback about any particular feature of Countly, please let us know. And obviously, we use Countly for the feedback collection, which I will slightly talk about in the future slides. Next up, we have an updated and much more useful Notes widget in our dashboards. So this is a real example. By the way, this is how we use it ourselves in our own dashboards. So we already had a Notes widget. So it was just simple text per se. So we have introduced a much more capable editor for the Notes widgets. And the idea is often a larger team is working on data inside Countly, right? So we want everyone to make use of data as efficiently as possible. And sometimes it's as simple as adding descriptions to things on the screen, right, to your dashboards. So this is what we are hoping to achieve with the new Notes widget in the dashboards. Add explanations to your data. Not every user in your server knows data as much as you do. Add a little bit of explanation so that data becomes accessible for your larger company. Next up, we have something called SDK Manager. So you can find it under Utilities, SDK Manager. So the idea here is, basically this is the beginning of a future endeavor. I guess we will get into a lot more complicated things. But right now, basically, of course, using the SDKs, you're collecting data and you are visualizing and using that data in your dashboard. However, the integration part, or understanding the health of the integration, or like what's being collected through which SDKs, and furthermore, actually maintaining all of this remotely are very important topics. So essentially, SDK Manager aims to achieve all of that. So you can see like a breakdown of your different SDK versions that are currently live in your applications. You can see like a distribution of data being collected from your case, constant data, crash data, event data, etc. You can essentially check like the health or the status of the data coming in to the server or within the SDK level. And finally, we have this SDK configuration section. Currently, we support Android and iOS, but the idea here is, we already have a remote config functionality, right? So it's intended to change your application's look and feel and logic without changing the application code base itself. Here, the idea is similar, but this time, basically, you control your SDK remotely. right? So currently it's limited to two things you can do. One, you can completely turn off the SDK remotely. So essentially, if you turn this off, the SDK will stop collecting and sending data to the server. Two, you can stop networking. So the SDK continues to collect data on the device, but it stops sending it to the server. So as I said, for now, this is an experimental functionality available for iOS and Android, but the idea is to work on this further and make it a more capable full SDK manager. This data, right, SDK analytics, as we call it, is already available in dashboards. So you can add dashboard widgets to any of your dashboards to actually visualize this information on your dashboards. Continuing from analytics technology and specifically app version reporting. So we have slightly adjusted how we actually visualize this information. So as you see here, you will have a much better understanding of the new version adoption of your user base. Basically, you can visualize your users, visitors, or their sessions as percentage or as absolute values. And you can quickly look at the time series information in terms of what the version adoption looks like. And of course, similarly, you can use all of this information in your dashboards, not only in application versions, but we made that same data, same visualization available in different types of data, such as device type breakdown over time, platform breakdown over time, or like browser breakdown over time. These are now available for analytics technology widget types on your dashboards. I guess one of the major things introduced last year was recurring push notifications. So we actually introduced two new types. One is recurring, the other one is multiple days, as we call it. So in total, we have 5 different push notification types in Countly right now. So essentially, as the name suggests, the recurring push lets you send push notifications in a given frequency. So you can send a monthly reminder to your users or daily or weekly. So essentially, this uses the already existing underlying foundation of Countly push notifications, but let you build kind of recurring notifications on top of it. Next up, surveys and NPS. So we have introduced a third type of visibility to surveys, which is always, right? So far, there were only 2 options available until they submit the survey and until they close the widget, both of which meant that if the user interacted with the survey in a given way, they wouldn't see it again, right? We also needed the always option ourselves, by the way. The very first thing I showed, the feedback part of Countly Guides actually makes use of this always option, meaning even if you have provided previous feedback through that widget, that's still available there. So you can go back and provide an additional response. So it's not limited by responses or you closing the widget per se. A minor secondary update here. We already had 2 options for a logo display inside your widgets, either like using a default logo or uploading a custom logo. So we added a third option there. So basically you can display no logo in the surveys or your NPS or your ratings widgets. They become completely plain at the end. So when it comes to customizing the look and feel of your widgets, we actually introduced 2 new places where you can customize it. One, it's in server settings. So this is like a global adjustment of what logo you want to use, what font color, what main color as like the button colors or like the main text colors, etc. So you can have a single global configuration if you want to, such as your brand colors, brand configuration, and the entire server by default will use those settings. The second place is an application specific place where under management applications, basically inside the application settings, you have the same configuration options. But this time, basically, this overrides the global settings if you have any. So you can either configure application level theming for feedback widgets, or you can apply those in the server level. So since we are in the subject of server configuration, and this is a minor update, but another overlooked subject is how configurable Countly is. So if you go to management settings of your Countly server, you will notice we actually have a lot of configurations, right? Every aspect of Countly is configurable, even things maybe you didn't know, such as drop-down item limits in Drill, right? So very simple, basic configuration, but essentially if you want, you can change it, right? So obviously the problem when you have this many configurations is discovering the available configurations, right? So that's why a small but very useful functionality, when you search for any specific keyword in your settings, we will give you the sections that, such the related settings for the given keyword exist, right? Such as in this example, I typed in drill and I'm looking at, okay, there's a request threshold configuration for long queries or specific drill related configuration. You get to access all of this in a very easy and actionable way. So highly recommended to try it out. Next up, nodes to time series graphs. So basically, this is, you will see this icon on every single time series graph on your entire dashboard. Basically, using this, you can add nodes to your time series graphs. They will be displayed on all of your graphs across the dashboard. You can make them public, you can make them private. So essentially, it's adding like another layer of information to data. If something important happened in that particular day, you'll be able to mark it on the graph for anyone to actually use that as an additional information. Next up, and actually a few of the next things I will be talking about, some like core changes to how we actually let you configure or query certain data. Starting from the in the last operator. So we have introduced this operator last year. So it's for date data types in terms of event segmentations and custom user properties. So this adds a dynamic layer to querying information. So it's especially very useful in like cohorts, for example, since cohorts are dynamic by their nature. While creating your cohort, you can indicate a user behavior based on in the last X days or months or weeks, right? So that we don't need to deal with any static dates per se. Same thing is available across multiple features of Countly, including drill, funnels. Basically, wherever you see like this query builder functionality, for any date field, you will have the option to do like in the last based queries for your data. So currently it's days, weeks, and months, and I guess years. But in the upcoming version, we will actually allow even more granular options such as hours. Another new operator. So this time it's for string data type. It begins with operator. So we have introduced this for two reasons. One, we already had a contains operator for string data type. However, as you might imagine, like when you run contains queries on large amounts of data, the performance really sucks. So the begins with operator introduces obviously not the same functionality, but as useful functionality, let's say. And it's further useful in these kind of use cases where I'm querying one of my views, or actually my view data point. I want to look at all the views that begin with blog, right? So essentially, I want to see the reports on all of my blog articles. So yeah, new begins with operator. This time, it's not a new operator, but a new data type. So Countly now supports array data type for custom user properties and event segments. So this is actually something we also needed a lot, but I think like it's very useful for various use cases. So in this example, you are seeing like the available operators for your array property. But essentially here we store this in the user profile level, and it contains multiple items, right? So as the name suggests, this is the SDKs in use for a given Flex workspace, actually. So I can quickly look into, okay, I want to look into workspaces that use the C++ plus Java SDKs. So I can easily do that using the query builder. Furthermore, in the data manager, for property values, property types that are array, list, or big lists, you can actually get to see like all the possible values of the given property, like you see in the screen. So this improves the data navigation, discovering what's available in the data. You can further configure the different data types, of course, within the data manager. You can also go to the individual user profiles that have this exact property value, right? So using just this simple link, you can go to all user profiles that has this value for their SDKs in use property. Jumping to Drill. So Drill is, I guess, the crown jewel of Calendly in many ways. Not a huge update, but one of the highly requested things. We have added like a table widget type for your drill queries. So you can visualize your drill results as a table on your dashboards. Another topic, what we call calculated user properties. So in Calendly, we have default, reserved, default, custom user properties already. And this fourth type is calculated user properties. So currently, we don't necessarily let you customize how this is calculated, but that's the future we are aiming. So two properties, age and engagement score, are right now calculated properties. So age is actually calculated from like the birth year property if you set it for the user profile. So basically, as the user ages, property will reflect that change automatically without you needing to do anything. Likewise, the engagement score is a calculation, an integer calculation essentially, that tries to attach a score based on the activity of the user. So again, it's a dynamic property. So as the user increases their activity within your application, this will be higher, right? But yeah, as I pointed out, the future we are hoping for this functionality is to let you customize how these are calculated and add your own calculated properties, which will be quite powerful, actually. Another small, but I would say mighty update that you might have missed, essentially. So all the data tables across the entire dashboard are updated to actually adjust the column widths, right? So here, a very real use case, right? I'm looking at all our blog articles, and they are not by default fit into the column area. So you can adjust the size of the columns to actually see the entire data, or like as much as you want to see. So this is again available across most of the data tables in the entire dashboard. Another user experience update. So if you ever dealt with feedback data in Drill, you might have noticed it's not too straightforward to actually do queries on feedback data. So last year, basically, we worked on this. So now, not only the widget names, but questions within your widgets, such as your survey questions, and the answers to those questions are displayed in full text in your query builder. So you don't have to look into any IDs, you don't have to guess things. Basically, you will see things in full text while you're building your queries. A somewhat advanced functionality, but something we actually started using ourselves a couple of weeks ago. Again, through the data manager. By the way, it's getting quite powerful with every release, so highly recommended if you didn't try it yet. We basically let you expire user properties if you want to. Right? So what do you mean by expiration? So you have two options. So you can choose to expire user properties at the end of a session or after a given number of days, right? So how is this useful? So this is our real actual use case, right? So basically we have certain properties that are updated through a backend system, right? And they are updated daily. And if they are not updated, they are not relevant anymore. So we basically configured them in a way that they are expired automatically after 2 days if they are not set or updated, right? Meaning we don't have to maintain this logic in our application to clear user properties, but they are cleared automatically if they are not relevant anymore. A use case for expiring user properties after every session is like, imagine the user does a configuration for a particular session, let's say like an app configuration for that specific session. So you are storing them for that session, and it gets auto-associated to all the data user triggers on that particular session. But as the user ends their session, the data is cleared. So essentially, it's not auto-attached to future data that will be originating from that particular user. So this is quite useful in many occasions, essentially. So as I mentioned, data managers is getting more and more powerful with every release. Again, something you might have overlooked, we actually have 3 separate user rights for data manager in user management currently right now. Essentially, the data manager itself still remains there, but we have separated reduction and transformations from the core data manager user rights. Why? Because data manager can be used to plan for your events, to make sure the intended events with intended data types are arriving to Countly. But at the same time, it can be used to transform data, right? So you can actually merge events together, or you can merge event segments together. So these are different level of access in our opinion. So that's why basically you can give data manager access to a larger group, whereas reduction and transformation, which actually change the data, could be limited to a different user set. Final update. So again, something you might have overlooked. So cohorts are already very powerful. So you can build kind of behavioral based cohorts, essentially grouping your users based on what they do or don't do inside your application. You can also build cohorts using user properties, right? Essentially, like metadata about your users could be leveraged by building cohorts. So far, this was only available as an AND operator. Essentially, basically, you couldn't build cohorts based on any OR operators. So that's available now. So you can combine, mix and match different criteria while building your user cohorts. Okay, so that was majority of what we worked on in 2023. So I want to get into this year a little bit. So this year we actually are planning 2 major releases. Let's say at least 2. There might be another one in November. This is what we are working with at the moment. So a March release is planned, and it has been already a work in progress. Hopefully we will be having a major release next month, and we have an August release, which will be quite a large release actually, which I will get into in a second. So in the March release, we actually have 4 main functionality. We are reworking alerts, so they will be much more useful with different levels of triggers. And I think this is a quite useful addition. So you will be able to trigger hooks based on alerts, right? Essentially, hooks so far worked on events or your cohort entrance, exit kind of triggers, but now they will be able to work or get triggered by changes in data, right? So that's quite powerful. Second one, responsive feedback widgets. So we give a lot of importance to our voice of the customer capabilities, right? Right now, this is surveys, NPS, and rating collection from your application users. However, the look and feel of those widgets are not ideal in certain scenarios. We really worked very hard on this one. The widgets across mobile, web, desktop, like they will be adjusted to look great on every platform, essentially. Number three, is a major update. We are introducing something called profile groups. So, as we just discussed, we have cohorts, right? Cohorts are groups of users based on their properties and based on their behavior inside your application. But sometimes you just need to build manual groups of users within your application, right? Like imagine a marketing list, or let's say, a hand-picked selection of your users, right? So you'll be able to do that using profile groups, and profile groups, will work just like cohorts when it comes to being able to use them during filtering, query building, or targeting, let's say, push notifications or remote configuration variables. And fourth item, one of my favorites actually, enhancing your data strategy, right? So we have this thing called data populator. Maybe you have used it at some point, maybe in the beginning of your Counter experience. So it's a feature that lets you fill in your dashboard with simulated data, so that you can actually explore different parts of Countly with data and without the need to do the SDK integration and wait for data to appear on these different reports. So data populator is not only useful to fill up an empty dashboard, in my opinion, but also to plan for a data strategy. So as we all know, SDK integration, planning for future updates, etc., they are very major workloads, right? So there is a lot involved in implementing a proper analytics strategy. So we are seeing the data populator as a way to let you simulate things before they get implemented in your application, right? So essentially, using the data populator, we want you to configure different scenarios, different probabilities, different relationships of data right within your dashboard without needing an SDK integration. So at the end of the day, of course, you will need to change your SDK implementation, etc. But this would be a great way to start simulating your ideas in your dashboard. And when you're ready, you get into the implementation, right? So this very greatly helps to not only like the product people in your organization, but also for everyone in your organization to actually visualize what is waiting for them when the SDK is integrated into the application, right? So this is 24.3. These are just like the four main things we will be releasing. There will be like many more in the release. So now let's talk about the next version, 24.8. So this will be quite a, I would say, breakthrough version for Countly, because we are thinking of introducing multiple large new things. A journey builder and enough notifications, right? So the enough notifications topic is actually something that has been on demand for a while now, right? Because Countly has push notifications. So it has mechanisms such as remote configuration and targeting, so that technically you can use remote configuration already in your applications to display certain type of content to your users. However, of course, as push notifications are, enough notifications are more like no code way of reaching your users, right? So essentially we want to bring it into Countly. But while doing that, we want to introduce something new to the system called, and these are code names for now, a journey builder. So right now, imagine while you're creating a survey, at the last step of the survey, you choose when it is triggered. So you can do it based on a user entering a cohort, and then they will see a particular survey. Imagine the same logic in a kind of multi-node journey builder experience. So essentially, you will be able to configure different types of things at each step of the user within your application, right? So we have a lot more details. For now, I will leave it at that. Maybe in the following weeks or months, we can share a little bit more about what we are thinking. The third stop, as you see, machine learning and AI in Countly. So this is a delicate topic for us because, as you are seeing across the market, these topics are overused in a lot of tools where, like, it's solely being used in marketing purposes or marketing jargon, as we are noticing across the board, especially I would say in our category of product analytics. So we want to do things properly as always. So that's why actually in the kitchen we have been working for a while about how we can best utilize these capabilities inside Countly. So this year will be the year we introduce our first machine learning and AI occurrences within Countly. So right now I can't share more, but again, hopefully we can do like a follow-up introduction to such functionality in the future.